Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Severe Setup. My name is Harry Powell, and I am joined once again by E. Spencer Kite. This will likely be the last time you will see me fill in for one Ian O'Neill. He is currently basking in the glory of being a newlywed, enjoying his honeymoon, I hope, to the fullest with his beautiful wife, and enjoying, hopefully, as many pints as those hands could possibly hold. We are here to cover Marcin Tybura versus Serghi Spivac 2, and we will pull no punches. This card is fucking terrible. As we have discussed previously on this podcast, there are often cards with tierings and A tiers, B tiers, C tiers, C tiers, and D tiers. We will run through the card as much as possible. As I said, I'm joined by Spencer Kite. First of all, Spencer, how are you? Are you well? Just give me an excitement gauge for breaking down the specific card.
I'm well. Excitement gauge. You said this is as positive as we're going to be for the next 25 to 30 minutes, and I'm wondering if we're going to get that long. That's what I will say. We might be able to set a new speed record for the setup with this one, if you want to. I will be able to give you information on all of these fights and reasons why, if you would like. But then you'll just say mean things to me, and I don't need that in my life today.
I mean, it's possible that mean things might be said. Look, we'll just recap sort of my feelings and obviously your feelings. I think you are maybe the first person to formalize this out on the X sphere, Twitter sphere, whatever it is. But it's been something that I think has been bounding around many media members' sort of peripheries for a long time, and that's the idea of card tiering, right? You know, you look at something like UFC 300. Those are very rare unicorn cards where from start to finish, everything is a screamer. Everything is wonderful. You have main event fighters opening the fight card, right? That is your A++++. You might get one of those every 2 to 3 to 4 years, right? You might get one of those. We then look at your average A+ or A cards, right? A+ cards, A cards. I think we'll sort of combine those two together. And those are your big pay-per-views. International Fight Week. If they decide to do a New Year's card, it's usually big around there too. July cards, these sorts of things, these middle of the year cards, summer cards, when they really pull together as much as possible. Or, you know, if the UFC are happening to, you know, sell the broadcast rights for the UFC, you might get a couple more A style cards in there. But those are the fights that really bring together everything that's amazing about the UFC. B cards, I think, is frankly every single pay-per-view that you're going to get. I think it's very rare that you see a pay-per-view drop to a C level tier, but that is a very, very strong main card and a pretty strong prelim section with maybe 1 or 2 fights there just for some fill-in. You then get to C cards. C cards are probably mostly your fight night cards that are out on the road. Really amazing headliner, some local guys dotted around, and then you might have a couple interesting prospects or some interesting names in there, some veterans, whatever it is. And then you have your D cards, which is your average UFC Apex style cards with, you know, maybe a main event that is somebody that we really need to pay attention to. Maybe it's somebody that's exploding onto the scene. Maybe there's a co-main event there with a veteran or another prospect, whatever it is. And then you get maybe like 4 rows down and you have the card that we're looking at today. So that is headlined by Marcin Tybura and Serghi Spivac. It is the second time of these gentlemen meeting. Our co-main event, in my opinion, is the best fight on the card, which is Javid Basharat versus Chris Gutierrez. Screamer of a fight at 135. We have Chepe Mariscal meeting Damon Jackson in what will probably be a gritty, grimy, enjoyable back and forth performance. Yana Santos fights Chelsea Chandler in a fight that is happening at 135. Allan Nasciamento and Jafel Fialho is probably the second best fight on this card. An absolutely brilliant matchup at 125 pounds. Very excited to see some more of Jafel Fialho and a guy that is proven and tested at 125 in Allan Nasciamento. We have Charalampos Gregorio fighting Toshimo Kazama, man coming off the road to UFC. Spencer will talk about him because he is intimately aware of him after staying up egregiously late to watch the road to UFC. Danny Barlow fights short notice replacement Nikolai Veretenkov. Karol Hossa versus Piani Kanzad is buried in the prelim section of an 11-fight card. Carl Williams fights Jonathan Deniz, Jono Aarons fights Yusuf Zalal. Very interested to see some more Yusuf Zalal. And then Stephanie Luciano fights Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu World Champion Talita Alencar. I mean, I guess we start at the main event. I guess.
Yeah, I mean, let's just work the way that we normally do. But yes, let's start with the big boys.
Okay, so Sergey Spivac and Marcin Tybura fought 4 years ago. Marcin Tybura wins a unanimous decision over Sergey Spivac. Interestingly, he was 1-4 in his last 5 at the time that they met, and so was absolutely desperate for a win. Goes out, turns out that win, then gets a 4-fight win streak. Massim Grishin, Ben Rothwell, Greg Hardy, Walt Harris. Goes and drops a fight to Alexander Volkov. These things happen in MMA. You then go and beat Alexander Romanov, which, you know, at the time, Alexander Romanov was a rising prospect, and that's a good win. Goes out and beats the human boulder that is Blagoy Ivanov. And then you go out and you have a massive main event against Tom Aspinall, and, you know, these things happen in MMA. You took him more than 60 seconds, so fair fucking play to you. That is an achievement. And then you go out and you just smoke Tai Tuivasa. And so we're here again. Sergey Spivac, the rise, once more, sort of that merry-go-round that is heavyweight. Tell me what you think of both men in terms of their divisional relevancy, and then tell me sort of what you specifically feel about this fight, bearing in mind that Marcin Tybura is 38 years old, probably wins the title for the worst haircut in MMA. Please, the floor is yours.
His haircut or Charles Johnson's skullet?
I will take Charles Johnson. It has some creative flair.
Okay, fine. The thing I like about this, so Marcin Tybura to me is sort of in that Neil Magny realm of veteran, experienced hand, guy you can count on. You know what to expect from him. Of course, he's going to lose to Volkov and Aspinall and guys of that tier, but he can also go out and, you know, truck Tai Tuivasa last time out and beat Alexander Romanov in a fight where it was, right, as you said, that fight was sort of like, let's see what we got in Romanov, and it was not enough. And so we have the answer. He is the perfect guy to reassess Sergey Spivac against this weekend, because Spivac has certainly grown and developed from the first time they fought. But we saw last time out against Cyril Gagné in Paris that he didn't have plan B. And he couldn't even really get into plan A as well as he wanted to. Part of that was because Cyril Gagné was very much in the, like, stay the absolute fuck away from me. I don't want to get into any wrestling entanglements. But, like, he was panic escaping. And Sergey Spivac couldn't figure out what to do. But, like, I understand that not all top 10 fights are created equal. Like, a top 10 fight at heavyweight, as this is not the same as a top 10 fight at bantamweight, as we had last weekend. However, in a division that is starting to have some changes, that is starting to move around a little bit, let me just see. Because I'm happy to have a guy like Marcin Tybura around. And let's just take another look and see if Sergey Spivac has addressed a couple of things and can get and has gotten maybe a little bit better.
Yeah, so I think stylistically, the interesting thing is the same, actually, in the first fight, and that is, can Sergey Spivac close the distance? Can he close the distance well enough that forces Marcin Tybura away from that sort of studious kickboxing that has become his MO? And if he can, we know that Spivac on the ground is pretty dangerous, has a solid head and arm, is pretty heavy on top, has good hip control, has good top control, and works his way through guards quite nicely. I think for Tybura, the MO, frankly, is exactly the same as we saw against Cyril Gagné, and that is shove him to the body, lots of low kicks, stime away some of that aggressive shooting, and then just keep your footwork moving, put a jab in his face, and let's see where we get to. I mean, I do fear that we are going to see a 5-round bit of a snooze fest here, because if Sergey Spivac is unable to get the takedown, plan B is certainly not as strong as plan A. I think I agree with you that plan B certainly has upped its level in comparison to what it was maybe 4 years ago when they first fought, but we're not looking, I think, at a Sergey Spivac that is going to come out here and completely dominate Marcin Tybura on the feet. Now, there is one wrinkle here, and that is that Sergey Spivac, although has been around in the UFC for a long time, is only 29, whereas Marcin Tybura is 38 years of age. And so I understand at heavyweight, 38 is basically 28 at every other division divisional relevancy, divisional level, sorry. But 38 is not nothing, and Marcin Tybura has been in the UFC a long time, has had a lot of fights. That means a lot of wear and tear on the body, a lot of damage. And it may mean that we see Sergei Spivac have the fresher chin, the fresher hands, the fresher athletic ability. Do you foresee that we go out here on Saturday night with as many snacks as possible to make this card palpable? We get to the main event and Sergei Spivac goes out and just cleans Marcin Tybura?
I think it's entirely possible. I will say I'm trying to limit snacks. I'm trying to cut out sugar as best I can.
Good fucking luck for this card.
Yeah, trying. I think it's entirely possible, and that's the piece I want to see, right? You said plan B isn't anywhere near to the level that it needs to be. I would argue that plan A has gotten much better even since their first fight, right? Which is take these dudes down and submit them and make them carry my weight. We saw him do that to Augusto Sakai and Derek Lewis and guys of that ilk, of which I think Marcin Tybura fits because he doesn't have, he doesn't even have the power of Derek Lewis, not even remotely. Very much more in line with that Augusto Sakai kind of build. And so that's the piece I'm looking forward to. I think Spivac can do it, but this is why we see them compete. I know 100% what I'm getting out of Marcin Tybura. It's all the things you just said. Can Spivac has he closed the gap between the two of them in the last 4 years to where he can go out and have a rebound to where we then have to say of him what we said of Tybura, which is, yeah, you lost to Alexander Volkov and Tom Aspinall. Fine. Okay, you lost to Cyril Gagné, who has been an interim champion and fought for the heavyweight title. You lost to Tom Aspinall. Okay. Now that you're hitting that prime of heavyweight, and really, truthfully, prime of your own athletic career at 29, are we going to see a little bit of forward momentum? Because you look at some of the guys in front of him, Stipe Miocic doesn't seem long for this division. You move one spot up to 8. Like, this is a classic Shawnee 8 fights 9, then 9 beats 8 and moves to 8, and the other one goes to 9, and we're still here 4 more years from now when they do it one more time to settle things. Maybe, but let's just see.
Indeed. Like you say, to me, there's zero divisional relevancy here. I think if Spivac goes out and gets a win and looks great, then there's a name that we can start to proliferate into a Spivac sort of a realm, or proliferate Spivac's name into an upper realm. But, in the same vein, we have seen the tiers. We have seen what he looks like at those upper echelons. And at least Spivac 1.0, or maybe Spivac 2.0, and we're going to come out and see Spivac 3.0 on Saturday. That's not been enough. Anyway, let's move on to what, in my opinion, is the best fight on this card. And equally, I really would have loved to have seen this be the main event. I think this over 5 rounds is an unbelievable matchup. We have Javid Basharat and Chris Gutierrez. Javid Basharat coming off his first one professional loss, which is something, but also first loss in the UFC, and going in against a guy in Chris Gutierrez who, is no slouch. There's not really a step back here from Ayman Zahabi to Chris Gutierrez. And okay, Chris Gutierrez is 33, and okay, he just lost to Song Yadong. But this to me is a absolute barn burner. You have spoken to both guys ad nauseum. Tell me what you think about the characters coming in here and how that can potentially play a factor in the matchup.
I'm super interested to see what Javid Basharat looks like after his first loss. I spoke to he and his brother Farad for a piece that is in the current issue of Fighters Only, up now at fightersonly.com, available on the app. Please go and subscribe to that. He didn't think he lost that fight. Now, listen, lots of fighters in close fights go, yeah, I didn't lose that fight. I didn't lose that fight. And I have to sit here on the other side of a Zoom call and be like, man, it was a competitive fight. Because I don't remember whether you won or lost specifically. I'm pretty sure I scored it for Ayman Zahabi and not because I've known Ayman for 15 years. But now it's your first loss. And let's see. And now you have one more loss than your little brother, who you have always been wanting to keep a step ahead of. And because the story is on brothers in the UFC, I had to mention, hey, the little brother that you've been trying to keep off your heels and keep in front of this whole time, hate to say it, man, he's kind of caught you. He may have actually passed you. He might be the better of the two. In fact, I think he is. And so that's really interesting. And Chris Gutierrez is that level of guy that we've been waiting to see Javid Basharat face, right? Somebody that exists in that 12 to 18 range in this division, which is a great spot to be in given the depth and quality of this division, can do some things really well, especially in the kickboxing department, but isn't necessarily a guy that's going to come out and just blow you out of the water if you're Javid Basharat. And so let's see. This to me is this is where we learn a lot about Javid Basharat, I think, because the last fight was close. It was competitive. It was probably available for you to win had you done one or two things differently. Now you get the opportunity. I know they switched up and went down to ATT, stayed in the dorms. We're training down there, which is an interesting thing to think about. Lots of good people there, lots of good coaches. Let's see.
The thing that I'm most interested in is there's an experience level difference here too, a UFC experience difference. Chris Gutierrez made his UFC debut, his full UFC debut in 2019 after losing to Hani Barcelos when Hani Barcelos was Hani Barcelos, right, at the Ultimate Fighter finale. He then has some names like Vince Morales, finishing Vince Morales with leg kicks. Let's not forget that. A draw against Cody Durden is nothing to be shabby about. Andre Ewell, good win. Bacharel Denar is a win. He then decimates Frankie Edgar. No, okay. Frankie Edgar was not Frankie Edgar when he beats him, but the people he is losing to outside of Hani Barcelos, he's got a loss to Timur Valiev, who is an excellent fighter, very, very underrated. Pedro Munoz, good fighter. And then Song Yadong, good fighter. I am mostly interested. You've already mentioned the stuff about Javid Basharat that I'm interested in. I am interested to see how Chris Gutierrez approaches this fight from a strategic perspective. Javid moves very, very well. He's very light on his feet. The in and out movement can be very, very deceptive. The jab is very strong. The grappling is strong. The counter grappling is strong from Javid Basharat. Can Chris Gutierrez get to those legs? Can he damage those legs? Can he stifle some of that movement? And if he does stifle that movement, can he force Javid Basharat into B game plan, C game plan, potentially even D game plan? And do we get to see that grit and tenacity and toughness that I know is in Javid Basharat because I've seen it in the training room before, but that we didn't necessarily get to see against Ayman Zahabi, where, like you, I think if he'd have just put his foot on the gas just a touch more, just a little more, and just say, actually, big man, you're not going to win this one. I'm going to have to take this from you. I know that for us in the corner, and I know that I have a massive amount of respect for him, but tonight can't be your night. And we didn't see that. We saw that Javid stuck to the game plan, and we saw that he believed that over that 15 minutes, he was going to get a breakthrough. And it just didn't come in the same way that he thought against Chris Gutierrez. This is a man that's going to be in your face for 25 minutes. 25 minutes is a long time for you to withstand those leg kicks if you don't deal with them properly. And I am very, very interested in that specific wrinkle. Do you have anything to add to the main event?
The only thing I will add to the people's main event, the co-main event of the evening, is I'm very curious to see if Javid Basharat just comes out and says, you know what? The best road here is I'm just going to wrestle. I'm just going to grapple. Because that's the path, right? How do you take away the leg kicks? You don't let him be standing on his legs. Don't give him any opportunity. Just get inside, get on those hips, get him on the ground, make him defend, make him wrestle, make him, even if it's just make him work back up to his feet all the time. Constantly on him, constantly inside that range, because that's how you beat Chris Gutierrez.
100%. And I should apologize. I just said 25 minutes with Chris Gutierrez. In my brain, this is the main event, and it is absolutely not. It is a co-main event. It is a 3-round fight. We are talking 15 minutes here, not 25 minutes. We will move on to what is probably going to be one of, if not the fight of the night contender, and that is Chepe Mariscal versus Damon Jackson. Chepe Mariscal, just a gritty, hard-nosed striker. Damon Jackson, very similar, a veteran of the UFC, somebody that we have seen implement a style that is favorable to the judges' scorecards, but he does it in his own way. And I think that's something that's quite interesting to me, where Damon Jackson wants to be on the ground, on top position, prioritizing damage. And that is something very, very interesting when you look at somebody like Chepe Mariscal to see how those styles sort of match up. He fought Trevor Peek in a recent performance, and Trevor Peek is something that you build in a game of some fashion. wildly unorthodox, drastically hittable, but one of the most rock solid iron chins that we have seen in a long, long time. And I think for Chepe Mariscal, this is going to be much more of an IQ test in that, how do I keep Damon Jackson off me? Can I split Damon Jackson's center line? Can I get Damon Jackson backpedaling? Can I get him shooting on counter shots that are too far away? Can I make sure that my lead hand is there to down block at any given time that I do get shots? Can I keep my back off the fence? Can I land enough damage on Damon Jackson to force him backwards? Am I able to slip shots, roll shots? Am I able to deter the grit and toughness and grindiness of a Damon Jackson performance? The answer is I'm not sure. I know that Chepe Mariscal is a tough man, is a gritty man, is a hard man on the feet. But Damon Jackson is the veteran in this division that he is absolutely needed. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is both IQ and gas tank, right? Damon Jackson is a guy that comes out and he is going 100 out of the chute. And by the end of the first round, he's got about 80 left. And then at the end of the second round, he's got about 62 left. And he's like, whew, man, I can't believe we made it to 3. I got to avoid damage for 5 minutes. Because, man, if this guy hits me a couple of times, my body is just going to be like, sorry, brother, we got to go. It's time to leave. And Chepe is a guy that, like, it's just a cool story, right? He's somebody that was around on the regional circuit for years and years. You go and look at his topology. He has fought a bunch of good competition on the regional circuit. Guys that have made it to the UFC, win some, lose some, Joe Anderson Brito, Pat Sabatini, like just a bunch of good competition. And then gets that short notice fight and has the fight he has with Trevor Peek. Turns around real quickly soon after, goes over to Australia, fights Jack Jenkins. Jack breaks his arm in the fight. It is what it is, but Chepe gets a second win in like 2 months. And it's like all of a sudden this guy is here. And then he wins a fight earlier this year against Morgan Charrier. And all of a sudden, this dude that wasn't ever going to be here and didn't seem like he was ever going to get here and was going to be resigned to being a champion tier fighter on the regional circuit is now 3-0 in the UFC and has a chance to beat a guy in Damon Jackson that is 6-3 in the promotion during this second run of things. One of those losses is a guy that's got the belt. So, like, it's pretty good competition. And so, kind of interested to see it. I think it'll be a fun fight. They both just like going. And so, let's see how it plays out.
Yana Santos is being fed Chelsea Chandler to see if she can actually get a win in the UFC. That's a fight that's happening at 135.
May be happening at 135. Chelsea Chandler doesn't, missed the weight and has trouble making this weight. And so it could very well end up being a catchweight fight.
Fair play. These things happen in MMA. Fair play to both women. I hope both of them come out and go in healthy. Allan Nasciamento versus Jafel Fialho. Before I sort of just go off on this fight specifically, this is our main card opener. I think it's an absolute screamer. Give me your thoughts on both men and how stylistically they might match up here.
I just want to see more of Allan Nasciamento in terms of an activity level, right? 2 straight wins, but he hasn't fought in well over a year. His last fight was the first event of 2023. Arguably 3-0 in the UFC, lost split decision to Tagiro Limbekov in his debut. I thought he won that fight. Jafel Fialho's in kind of a similar position, maybe an even better position, right? Loses his debut to Muhammad Makayev, has him in that knee bar, has a very good performance, all things considered. And then in his last 2 fights has gone out and been like, yeah, I'm just going to get you guys out of here because you can't hang with me on the ground against Danny Perez and Ode Osborne. And so you want to give, like, this fight is a testament to how good flyweight has gotten. Neither of these guys are ranked. Both of them probably should be or could be. And you want to give me these 2 dudes probably in a grappling match to kick off the main card and be one of the fights of this weekend that is like sign me all the way up and give me this on every card.
I agree.
Please wax poetic about their grappling.
I will do. I mean, look, Jafel Fialho losing to Muhammad Makayev is still insane to me in that I have absolutely no idea how Muhammad Makayev doesn't tap to that knee bar. Like, I really, really do. I mean, I do know he's just so willing to take the break and he is so willing to take the damage that he's just willing to allow his leg to break in order to get out of the submission. I'm sure these things happen in MMA, I guess. Jafel Fialho is a guy that is looking at submission threats at any given opportunity. He is much more of a sport grappling based grappler. We are looking at leg entanglements. We are looking at inversions. We are looking at knee bars. We are looking at heel hooks. We are looking at jumping on submissions from lots and lots and lots of different positions. Allan Nasciamento, whilst being a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, is much more of a slower, more methodical. I want to grind you. I want to make sure I get to my positions. When I get to my positions, I'm going to hold them. And then I'm working myself into upper body pins. I'm looking to squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. I'm looking to make you suffer. And then I'm just going to fucking submit you if I get a chance. And that strategic clash is really, really interesting to me always, especially when it's at 125 pounds, where there is almost unlimited gas, where the speed and the dynamism of some of those scrambles, if Jafel Fialho can force Allan Nasciamento into those high-level scrambles, is going to be electric. And I was also impressed against Jake Hadley with Nasciamento's hands. And I do wonder whether we see an element of that here, where my personal preference is that we just see 3 rounds of MMA, right? So there's a bit of everything, a bit of madness everywhere. Sometimes what happens is when we have these 2 high-level grapplers, it turns into a kickboxing match. And if that is the case, I think Jafel Fialho showed a good account of himself against Muhammad Mokaev on the feet. And Allan Nasciamento, certainly, and I mean, Jake Hadley is by far and away, his preference would be to grapple. We saw that against Kalen Loughran in elements. But I think Allan Nasciamento impressed me against Jake Hadley on the feet. And so I do wonder, that was a couple of fights ago now. And so I wonder what the extra additions have been for both men. Do you have anything to tie a bow on this?
Just looking forward to it. Can't wait.
Absolutely. Charalambos Gregorio is fighting Toshiomi Kazama. I think this is an insane fight to put at the top of the prelims. I don't think it's going to provide what the UFC think it is going to provide. Please tell me how I am wrong.
I can't.
Okay.
I can't. I won't even try to. I mean, listen, Kazama makes it to the Road to UFC finale, loses to Rinya Nakamura because Rinya Nakamura is very good. He then comes out and loses to Garrett Armfield, gets punched up, and so the path for Gregorio is punch man in, face very hard. Conversely, Gregorio wins on on Dana White's Contender Series against a guy named Cameron Smotherman, who is solid but a little bit green still. And then he goes out and loses to Chad Anheliger, a Canadian veteran who is 37 now, I believe. And so it just sort of tells you where they top out. I don't know why this is the final fight of the prelims. If it's me and you're wanting to take people from shoulder programming, which is part of what sort of the UFC mandate is, right? We always see the War Room and all the guys from all the different shows have the little letters next to them that say where they came from, and they want to showcase those guys as much as possible. Then you do, Danny Barlow gets the showcase because he's undefeated and he's coming off a knockout win. And the guy he's facing in short notice replacement, Nikolai Veretetnikov, was a Contender Series guy himself. I don't know why this is here.
We're going to move on to Danny Barlow and Nikolai Veretetnikov. An interesting fight. Danny Barlow, as you mentioned, undefeated, still feels a little green to me in a division where, frankly, you just can't be green at 29 years of age. And I know that that's a harsh thing to say because he frankly is where he is, right? Looked good against Josh Quinlan. Has a fantastic record for finishing, hits really hard, fights long. I think the Uros Medic fight is a tough fight to lose. I think that would have been a really good test for him. He comes in here against Nikolai Veretetnikov, who, as you mentioned, 6'1" in the division, 34 years of age. He is somebody that, we really, really need to see it if we're going to see it. Loses to Michael Morales on the Contender Series. These things happen in MMA. Gets the call up after 3 wins on LFA. United Fight League. I apologize. What are we expecting here? I mean, 6'1" at 170, 74-inch reach. It's a decent advantage. Danny Barlow, 6'2", 79-inch reach. So he's coming in, and we know that Danny Barlow is long and fights long. What do you expect coming in here?
I expect Barlow to be looking for the left hand of God, which is his nickname and his primary weapon, early, often, and frequently. And that's where the green piece comes in, right? That's the bit of it. He's 8 fights into his career, 9 fights into his career. There just aren't secondary weapons. This to me is a little bit of a trap fight. Veretetnikov is solid. Like he's, as you said, The loss to Michael Morales is a loss to a guy that's undefeated and climbing the ranks in the UFC currently. Yes, he's won 3 straight since against middling competition in UFL or whatever it was. But like, this is just one of those ones where if you're Danny Barlow and you're overextending a little bit and you're trying too hard to create that moment, this guy that's pretty good and trains with a good crew and has been at Kings for a long time and things like that can just come out in 29-28 you. So be a little bit careful. Don't overextend. Let the shot come to you. Let the finish come to you. Let the knockout come to you instead of trying to, because right now for Danny Barlow, it's just swinging. Like, it's just, I'm a good athlete and I'm going to swing these hands. If we can tighten it up a little bit and let it be more of, I'm going to throw these hands and I'm going to touch you and I'm going to create openings for this left hand that puts everybody down, then we'll be fine. But this feels like it could be a banana skin.
Very potentially. And we're going to move on to Karol Hossa and Pani Kianzad, which is buried deep inside these prelims. Both these women have been around the UFC long enough that it feels as though they must have fought 3 times already. However, this is a meeting of Karol Hossa and Pani Kianzad for what I believe is the first time. It's a fight that is happening. I don't feel like there's much divisional relevancy here. Save me in this fight.
I mean, again, this is one of those ones where it's like, well, it's a matchup between ranked competitors, but that speaks to the dearth of new talent in the bantamweight division as opposed to the level of these individuals. Karol Hossa somehow is still only 29. That feels impossible because it feels like she's been in the UFC for 29 years. Pani Kianzad, every time she starts looking good, she then goes on a 2-fight slide or runs into a Macy Chasson like she did last time out. It's telling to me that this fight is on the prelims and Yana Santos on a 3-fight losing streak and Chelsea Chandler, having missed weight last time out, is on the main card. But I think that speaks to the belief that if any of those 4 is somebody that maybe has a little newness and freshness, it's Chandler, just because we haven't seen as much of her. This is just an indictment of women's bantamweight where we need new talent, fresh blood, new content. Like, if anybody else wanted to come along and just make a real quick run, now's the time, ladies. Now is the time.
Absolutely. 2 fellas that don't do much running is Carl Williams and Jonathan Denise at 265 pounds. All I'm going to say is that I pray for something that happens inside 15 minutes. Carl Williams took Lucas Brzeski to a decision. These things happen sometimes in MMA. Taking Chase Sherman to a decision means you should get cut immediately. And then he takes Justin Taffer to a decision. And, sometimes these things happen, but you should have been cut already. Jonathan Denise comes in, a jab right cross, 3 minutes 15, wins a contender series, comes in, Austin Lane, wins inside 2 rounds with a nice left hook. It's big meaty men doing big meaty men things. And that sandwiches us nicely to Jono Aarons and Yusuf Salal. I'm not even going to ask you about that fight, and I'm not going to ask you about the one underneath. But Jono Aarons versus Yusuf Salal, frankly, to me, actually should be our prelim headliner. Like, I totally understand that if we want to, shoulder organization, give them some props, give them some limelight. I get it. I totally get it. I'm with it. But Jono Aarons is a bit of a madman, comes across from kickboxing, looks pretty good. Yusuf Salal, I think, is somebody that is certainly growing into his physicality, into his fight IQ. Tell me why you're interested in specifically Yusuf Salal, but actually about this fight.
I mean, I included this fight on my monthly The 10 on UFC.com because it's the one for me this month. I really like Yusuf Salal. He is somebody that I think when you go back and look at how things went at the end of his first run, where it's, okay, we got this new guy on short notice. His name's Ilia Topuria. Good luck. Great. Sungwoo Choi, okay, you lost a close decision. Sean Woodson, you lost a split decision. Damone Blackshear, first trip down to bantamweight. Damone Blackshear's a good grappler. He's better. He's a better guy than his record in the UFC indicates. And away you go. Suddenly you haven't won a fight in 4 and you're bounced after winning 3 fights in like 6 months to start your UFC run. I think he's at the point now, to what you said of growing into his IQ and growing into his physicality. He's now 27. He's been here once. He knows what he needs to do. We saw even just in the return fight against Billy Q. You go out and submit Billy Quarantillo. That's a good win. That's the best win he's had in his career. And it is the kind of win that showed. And he won that fight from second one. There was no point. Like Billy Q is usually I'm going to come out, you're going to beat me in round one, and then I'm going to beat you in round two. And Yusuf Zalal was like, I'm going to take the beat you in round one part. And then when we start round two, I'm just going to keep beating you. And there is a different confidence about him. I saw him talk to him a little bit in Denver. There's just a different little bit of the swagger has always been there, but it's now at the point of I'm not trying to convince myself, and I don't feel like I need to convince you either. I'm just going to come out here and do it. That is always interesting to me because he has a wealth of talent. He has an abundance of skill. And as you said about Jarno Aarons, comes from kickboxing, comes from motocross before that, is a bit of a mad bastard. And if you want to give me a mad bastard against another mad bastard, let's go. Jarno Aarons looked great against Stephen Wynn. Now, granted, it's Stephen Wynn. Fine. But on a card like this, where we're struggling and we're clutching at straws, you want to give me these two dudes. I don't know why this isn't on the main card. I don't know why this isn't at the absolute least the prelim closer. We get it second on the day, fine, but I'm going to then be like sitting around kind of disappointed until we get to some of the stuff on the main card that I really want, that I'm interested in seeing. Because the one I want the most is going to be done in the second fight.
Absolutely. And I think this curtain jerker really, really just tells you everything you need to know about this card. 115 pounds. Two women that drew on the Dana White Contender Series. Both get a contract. Just going to let that just simmer there, just for a wee second. A draw on the Dana White Contender Series at 115 pounds. Talita Allan made good on her debut just with a split decision win over Ryan Amanda. And Stephanie Luciano now comes in and fights one more time, Talita Allan, hopefully not to a draw this time. I mean, look, Talita Allan is 33. Let's not expect too much from her. Stephanie Luciano, certainly with the higher upside in that she's 24. Talita Allan, very, very, very legitimate black belt world champion, but stepped away from competitive grappling quite a while ago, especially at the elite level. Neither of these fighters are very good. Don't expect an elite level match of 115 pounds. Is there anything specific that you are interested in other than why they are almost immediately rematched after drawing in the UFC proper?
So the rematching in the UFC proper is like, fine, you want to resolve it, cool, but this should have been like week one of Contender Series this year. We run it back and these two figure it out. And if they wanted to continue competing on the regional circuit prior to this, we could have done the rematch if we gotten around to it and it made sense this year. I mean, it's just, right, like, I don't know, man. Stephanie Luciano tried to have a fight in March. Shauna Bannon pulled, and then she got dengue fever. And she couldn't compete. And, you know, that win for Talita Allan is one of the probably not best split decision wins in a long time. I recall it being one of those ones where a lot of us were like, hang on, what? Very similar to Ray and Amanda, her loss last time out against Pooja Tomar. So Ray and Amanda needs to address I continue to get into fights that should be not as close as they seem. Because she's now 0-2 in the UFC with two poor split decision losses. But yeah, this is the perfect and proper opener for this card.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, wraps us for this card. I will leave this card by just highlighting the points that we are really looking forward to. There is something for Spencer in the main event. We both agree that co-main event is fantastic. Third fight on the main card, Chepe Mariscal versus Damon Jackson, will be fun, for sure. Allan Nasciamento, Jafel Fialho, potential fight of the night sat right there if Chepe Mariscal versus Damon Jackson doesn't take it. we'll skip through some prelims pretty quick, and then we'll get to Jono Errans versus Yusuf Salal. And I think genuinely that is an unbelievable fight. It should be a showcase, in my opinion, for Yusuf Salal. But Jono Errans comes in, does mad bastard things, and we are where we are. Thank you very much for listening. Next week, you will be joined by my man on my left and or right, depending on how you're looking at this. One, ESK. You can find that man on UFC.com, on Sportsnet, and on Fighters Only. And he will likely be joined by one, the General, Graham O'Donnell. Graham McDonald. Jesus Christ. Sorry, it's late here, lads. It's gone 1 a.m. I will be away. I will be in New York City. Ian O'Neill will be away doing his honeymoon. But we will be back for the breakdown and the severe setup coming to you on the 19th of August. Thank you so much for your listenership. Thank you so much for getting this far. You will find me at Harry Powell, at BJJ_Harry Powell on the Twitters, on the Instagrams. Have a good evening. Thank you very much. Take care of yourself.